Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. What you're looking at here in the picture, this is the expansion set for Global War 1936 to 1945 called Elite Fighter Squadrons. There's 15 planes there. We're going to talk about these tonight a little bit, not much. Mostly I'm going to talk about biplanes, and we'll get into that in a second. And also some planes that I needed for the new expansion set that's coming out for the Russians. It's all about Russian guards. It's called Elite of the Soviet Union. But anyway, let's just start here, okay? Now, when I was at Ray Carcass's house for my most recent game there, a lot of you might have seen some footage of that in Edmonton. One of the things that we kept laughing at, there was a guy there, Dan. He was playing the Americans, and he kept like we were playing with these, and he kept picking up his plane and moving it, right? But he wouldn't pick up the thing. This isn't the chip for that plane, but he kept moving it, and we'd keep having it down. Dan, take the chip with it, you know. Oh damn, and he'd get all mad and everything, you know, because he'd forget the chip again. He goes, why don't you just put them on magnets like the rest of the plane? That's not a bad idea, Dan. Look at that. What? Oh my goodness. Great idea, Dan. So all of these things are on magnets. Now when I first tried it, I didn't get the magnet deep enough. Here, let me just show you one of them. Like I kind of put the magnet flush, and still like I've indented it just a little bit. I was a little scared about going through. Like these chips, they all come in a set of 15, right? And I didn't want to poke through one of them. But so I mean, you can't wave them around or anything. They're gonna fall if you do, right? But yeah, like but you can pick them up and move them and put them down, right? But you know, like if you start waving them around like that, then it's not gonna work. One of them, like the first one that I did, which one was it? I can't remember which one it was, but it's actually got two magnets in it, because the first magnet that I put in, I didn't put it in deep enough, and then so I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna have to put another magnet on that one because I couldn't get it out of there. So anyway, the one with two magnets holds really good, and I'm thinking maybe I could put two magnets in. But you know what? This is gonna be okay, because it's not like you're throwing these things around anyway. You're just picking it up and moving it, and that works just fine, doesn't it? So way to go, Dan. Thanks for the idea. Okay, so another thing, see, this is called a PO2. This is the Night Witches. This is for the Soviet Union, and what they were women got into these biplanes at night, and they'd fly over the German lines and then turn their engines off so that the Germans couldn't get a beat on them, like where they were, and then they just float over top of the German encampments and drop grenades on them, but they made kind of a sound, this whistling sound, and so they called them the Night Witches, because it sounded like, and they were women, and it sounded like they were flying by on brooms, right, because of the plane moving through the air. So anyway, there's a couple of these PO2s that come in the new set, Elite of the Soviet Union, but you don't get them. Like you get all the chips and everything, and then it recommends that you go to Shapeways and buy two of these. And they're not that expensive or anything, but I didn't really need anything else at Shapeways, and you know, like it's a pretty big price for delivery. Like for me, it's probably about $20 Canadian, because the factoring in the exchange rate and everything. And since I didn't need anything else, I couldn't see sending away for just two tiny little planes like that, right? So another thing that I've done recently was I bought a couple of the swordfish fighters. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but I just wasn't sure how we get them into my game. And see, that's the British, it's called a swordfish. If you've heard of the Taranto raid, these things were torpedo bombers, and so they came off of carriers in the Mediterranean, and they torpedo bombed the Italian Navy in Taranto, and that's the Taranto raid was done with these swordfishes, right? So anyway, they're kind of cool and everything, but I didn't need 5 of them. You get 5 of them in a set like you do with everything. So I thought, you know what, these kind of look like these things, right? Like they're really similar. Sure, the PO2 is a little bit nicer, but you know, because it's not solid in between the wings and everything, but they're almost exactly the same shape. And for the amount of money I'd have to spend, you know, I might as well just use these things, right? So this is what it looks like, painted in the Russian colors. Now that's very similar, isn't it? These two planes here, and I've got the red painted on them because that, for me, that's a specialty plane, right? Those will be the PO2s, and they'll be Russian guards, so they will be +1 attack and defense. But then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with these swordfishes, because I've been thinking for a long time about putting other biplanes into it, because anybody that has the 1914 game like I do, and a lot of us do, well, there's some free units right there that you could put into the game. Like there's one of them right there. There's the French one, right? And so I thought, you know, like we have here, let me just move the camera. We have these other units here. Like I did go ahead and paint the things gray. If you remember my last video, I painted, color-coded all my boats, and I was suggesting that maybe I should paint the torpedo boat destroyers. And you see the Italian subs down there, the coastal subs. I suggested painting them gray because they were old. They were from World War I, so they were old and gray, right? So yeah, that's what I did. And I thought, well, you know what? This would be a good opportunity to do that with these biplanes as well. And what I did was 2 per nation, right? And I thought, like the way the rules are implemented with the torpedo boat destroyers and the coastal subs is that you can't buy them. There's no cost associated with them because they're left over from, not necessarily from World War One. Like they might have been built, you know, like in the 20s or maybe the early 30s or something, right? But they predate World War II, but they didn't just throw them away. They thought, you know, like, let's just throw them into service. And no, they're not going to be hugely effective, but you know, it's better than not having anything, right? And the same with biplanes. Like I've been reading up on biplanes, and they weren't largely used because they come to the end of their usefulness basically in the 1930s with the monoplanes, like like the Spitfire here and the BF-109. They were much faster, right? And so the monoplanes weren't that effective, but that doesn't mean they were completely useless, right? In World War II. You could still do reconnaissance with them. They found that you could do night raids, like the PO2, they were doing the night raids. Well, the Germans had a biplane as well, the HE something or other. You can buy 5 of those at Historical Board Gaming as well. And so they sent those to the front lines to counteract the night witches, and they would do the same thing. They'd fly over the Russian encampments at night and throw grenades on them, right? So that was one thing you could do. But one thing that was even more effective was putting torpedoes on them and going after boats, because you didn't need to get right over top of a boat to drop a torpedo on it. Like you'd be a ways away, you'd drop the torpedo in the water, and then the torpedo would shoot off towards the boat, right, in the water. And also you could land them easily on these small carriers. That's another reason why these things were effective, right, was because of these small carriers. They could land them on them. And so like with these things here, they give you the rules for them at Historical Board Gaming. They're 4, 4, and 4. So attack 4, defense 4, movement 4, and the cost was 7. But I'd kind of like to make everybody's the same, right? Like the HEs that they have, that was they only move 2, and you know, like I kind of like to make all the biplanes the same, kind of like all the torpedo boat destroyers are the same, and all the coastal subs are the same, and make them so that they're not a huge part of the game, but you get a couple of them to start the game, and I envision them being the same type of role as a torpedo boat destroyer or something. Like when you're going into battle with your boats, you take those ones in there, and they're cannon fodder, right? You lose those first. And it would be the same with these biplanes. Like you'd scramble those, into a fight, or you take them into a fight, and you'd lose those first, right? There's something in this game called what is it? The fighters air superiority in the first round, right? Well, you could lose one of these in your air superiority war instead of losing the Spitfire, right? Because this one you got for free, and this one cost $10, right? So easy choice there. Plus, I think what I'd do is I'd make them 3 and 3, like attack 3, defend 3. And then I'm not sure if I want to go for movement of 2 or a movement of 3. And the movement of 2 would only make it good for going one space and back. And that's what the PO2 does in the game. It's only a movement of 2, right? But that would be good. That would make these things have a limited impact in the game, like I wanted. They still have they could still go as far as a regular plane. Like they go about 1,000 kilometers, right? But they weren't very fast, and that was the thing. So you could use them for combat air patrol, but also like you could use them just to go out and hunt subs. Like if anybody comes within one space of your land zone, that's where they would be effective. And like these ones here, for instance, they have a target selection of 1 to 2, but that's with its attack value at 4. So I think that I would make it a target selection against naval units at a 1 if it was attack and defense 3. So all of the biplanes would be 3, 3, and either 2 or 3 with a target selection of 1 against naval units. You could use them on combat air patrol. There is interception value of 1, like a fighter's interception value is 3, right? But these ones would only be 1 because obviously they're not nearly as good in the air, right? You'd have to surprise somebody in a Messerschmitt to take one of them down, right? Anyway, so there's that. Oh, you know what else that reminds me? I'm looking at this little carrier here about the things like these elite fighter squadrons. Like when we were putting them on here, like they just they would just fall off of there, right? But if you now with the magnet on there and with the magnetized carriers, oops, sorry about that. So that stays on there a lot better, right? So I'm really pleased with that. And again, thanks, Dan. That was a great idea. Anyway, so let's move along here. So let me just show you, like, if I was to put 2 in the game, and it's kind of screwed up here because the game has already started, right? So like the French don't have Paris, so I just threw one over here on London, and I threw one of them down there. But another good thing about it is that the planes, hardly any of them needed to be painted. I needed to paint the German ones because the 1914 game doesn't come with any black pieces. These pieces here were Russian, so, and they're an exact color match for the ANA Italians in World War II, right? And the Russians needed to be painted as well. Like here's the Russian one here, because of my Russians are a little bit darker, but also they didn't have any. But the Americans, my Americans are darker. Look at that. It's a perfect color match for those Americans. And let's see over here. Here's a German one. And they're all the exact same sculpt, right? So this is almost an exact color match. Like it's so close I'm not even going to bother painting, right? Almost an exact color match. Huh. Oh, I see what's going on there. It's almost an exact color match for the Anzac. But yeah, like what I would do is I'd put one on the capital and then one somewhere else. Like for the Japanese, this would be the obvious place right over here, right? But then again, I don't know, like it depends on whether I go attack 2 or attack 3, because if it's attack 2, then maybe it's not so good in the land over there. Maybe it would be better off somewhere, you know, on the coast, right? But also, where is it here? I forgot to take one of them up there. The British one, the British color in 1914 is exactly the same color as my Chinese guys. And it kind of grates my nuts that they didn't have a fighter for the Chinese in this game. So there you go. We'll give them a biplane. I'd like to make them where they're where they are movement of 3. Because then if you have an air base, then it's actually a 4, right? And you could actually do something with them. But I just, like I'm kind of caught between being historically accurate and making a game out of it, basically, right? So it's hard to say. Maybe you can put a comment in the comment section what you would do. Do you go with complete historical accuracy, or do you like sort of fudge it a little bit to make a game out of it? Like these ones here were 4, like their movement was 4. So not all biplanes were equal anyway, right? So that's the other thing. The British, I was going to give them 3. So they got 1 here and one up in Great Britain there, and then I figured 1 on Africa somewhere. Except for I probably would have put it up there, but the Italians, Panzer King there, he's playing the Axis. He already took Cairo off me, the bastard. So that's probably where I put it, is Cairo, right? Either there or Gibraltar. And then 1 on the eastern states and 1 on the western states. And I'd like to make them 3 and 3, but let me know what you think. Is that too much, having these biplanes go 3 spaces, whereas a regular fighter goes 4 spaces? They were just about identical in the amount, the distance they could fly. The monoplane could fly a little bit further maybe, but not very much, right? It's the speed that was the big difference. They were 2 or even 3 times faster in some cases, depending on what kind. I like the Spitfire was about twice as fast, and the Bf-109 was almost 3 times as fast as the HE. I was comparing them to the German one. So anyway, that's what I'm talking about here. Is putting these biplanes in. But I think it'd be cool too, because early in the game, in 1936, you hardly have any units in the game, right? And that's one of the reasons why it was a great idea putting the elite fighter squadrons in as well, right? Because you all of a sudden had some units that you could move early in the game. But early in the game, there's not many units in. And most countries don't have very much income either, so you can't really buy anything. So having a couple of weak fighters in the game at least gives you something you can move, right? I don't know. And then maybe, I don't know, like I could carry that on. Maybe you have to take them out of the game at some point. Like if they're still around in 1941 or something, say, you know what, these are obsolete, and take them off. And say if you still have 2 of them, maybe you could trade them in for 1 fighter in July of 1941 or something. I don't know. I'm going to give it some more thought, but I'd like your thoughts as well. I'll ask some people about them and see what they think. I just thought it would be a good idea to put something that I have already in my boxes here, throw them on the board and throw them on like the other things are, like they already have World War I stuff in there, the coastal subs and the torpedo boat destroyers, right? So if they're going to have those, why not have the biplanes as well and make them weak and not move very far like these things, right? I think it'd be kind of cool. It's an easy way to put another unit into your game, that's for sure, because, like I've got my game almost stocked, but most people that are starting out with this game, it's going to be a while probably before you get, a whole complement of units in the game, except if you're industrious like Rank Carcass and you're using a shit ton different color chips and you're using those as units, right? But anyway, this is one idea that you can do, and one that I think that I want to do, is just put these units into the game. So, that's me talking about planes today. So, anyway, take care everyone. General Hand Grenade out.